In our last movie, we looked briefly at the syntax of the inner join. In this movie, we're going to look at a little closer at the inner join syntax and at different ways of expressing inner joins, and we're also going to introduce a new kind of join, the left join. To begin with, let's take a look at our sample database, and we're going to look at the data from the customers table. As you can see, I've added two new rows to the customers table. These rows are John Bull and Jacqueline Dupont. And if we take a look at the data from the orders table, you'll notice that in the cust ID column, there are no instances of 5 or 6, which are the customer IDs for John Bull and Jacqueline Dupont. Therefore, the two new customers have not yet placed any orders with the fictitious company of the sample database. We'll see the significance of that in a moment. To begin with, however, let's take a look at the same syntax of inner join query that we looked at in the last movie. We're going to join the tables with a comma and use a where clause to specify a particular joining criterion. As you can see, in the results that are output, there's no mention of our two new customers, John Bull or Jacqueline Dupont. There's no Bull or Dupont listed in the surname column. We'll take a look at the reason for that, as I said earlier, in a moment. But for now, let's take a look at a different way of expressing this same inner join syntax. We can use the same beginning part of the select query, but when we come to specifying the tables, instead of using a comma to separate the table names, we're going to use the words inner join to separate the two table names. Then immediately after that we'll say on and give the particular criteria for joining the two tables. In this case, the fact that the column cust ID is the same in both tables, which we're expressing like that. Apart from the fact that we're using the full inner join syntax, and we're using the keyword on instead of including a where clause, the syntax is pretty similar. There is a third way, which is more concise. Let's take a look at that. We're going to use the same first part of the select query. However, with this part, instead of using the on keyword, we'll use the using keyword. And in brackets, we'll put the field name that has to be, the data of which has to be the same in both tables. This outputs exactly the same set of results. The reason why we don't use the shorter syntax all the time is that it specifies that cust ID column name has to be the same in both tables. Sometimes we won't want to have the same column name in both tables, in which case we'd have to use the on syntax that we used above. Now, as I mentioned earlier, there are two customers that have been added to the customers table that have not yet placed orders. Our select query at the moment is getting information about all the customers who have placed orders. However, if we wanted a select query that would get information about all customers, regardless of whether or not they've placed an order, we couldn't use the inner join to get that information. We would be much better off using the left join. Let's take a look at the syntax for a left join. Instead of writing inner join, customers inner join orders, we write customers left join orders. Otherwise, the syntax is identical. We get a different result set. John Bull and Jacqueline Dupont are both listed despite the fact that they haven't placed any orders. That's why we've got two null values in the right-hand column. There's also been a change to the ordering of the data, but we can change that using the order by clause, so that's not terribly significant. One final thing to consider about the left join is that we're able to use both the using syntax and the on syntax. On customers cust ID equals orders cust ID, but we can't use a where clause. A left join requires us to explicitly tell MySQL what to use as the joining criteria using the on keyword, in the same way as using the full syntax for the inner join. One final thing for this movie is the use of aliases. At the moment, our select queries are looking a little bulky. We're spelling out the full names for the tables every time we make mention of them. Let's take a look at this alternative method of specifying the table names. As you can see, I'm just using single letters when I specify the columns. When I come to specify the table names, all I need to do is to add the single letters, or whatever alias I require, after the table name, and then they become used as aliases of the tables. I'm using the simple inner join syntax with the comma to separate the tables and a where clause. But this would work equally well using the aliases with any of the other syntax we've seen in this movie. The mistake I've just made is to put a dot in place of the space that should have been there. There's the correct syntax: customers space C, comma, orders space O. That allows us to specify the particular aliases that we want to use for our tables. We'll take a look at column aliases soon. In our next movie, we're going to look at data aggregation.